Robeson County looks at first, like any other county in eastern North Carolina, natural beauty of the land and the water that's so plentiful. Old homes on tree-lined streets, acres and acres of corn and tobacco. But a closer look reveals some characteristics that aren't so typical and aren't so beautiful either.
Robeson County is one of the poorest counties in North Carolina. Its poverty can be traced primarily to a dependency on tobacco farming and a lack of emphasis on education. Many people here have never developed skills for any jobs but farming.
In many ways, Robeson County is like what we would regard as a third world country or county. We have a high percentage of ethnic minority people. In fact, the majority of the county is ethnic minority, a high level of poverty. Most of the capital that is produced from agricultural and from industry leaves the area, so the profits largely leave the area. The wages that are received from industrial and agricultural jobs are very low, in fact, the lowest in the state.
There's something else that makes Robeson County different and makes it harder for the people here to overcome their poverty.
In days where two races have trouble getting along, there are three races in Robeson County: whites, blacks, and Indians, all vying for jobs, education, and economic opportunity. Robeson County's poverty and prejudice are complicated by another problem: drugs. Robeson County's easy access to the coast and a major north-south highway like I-95 make it a prime location for cocaine distribution.
As you see there, we're back in Robeson County. We're talking about another thing. You see the title. We're talking about a fellow by the name of Julian Pierce. Now, Mr. Pierce, he was a very intelligent man. He was a freedom fighter. He fought for tribal rights, school rights, and civil rights all together. And he was murdered for his trouble. Mr. Pierce, he was a Native American. He was originally from Hope County. He was born in Moore County. He lived in Hope County. He did his schooling in Hope County. He did his schooling in a majority Native school, very poor school, but it was one of our schools. And the school's called Hawkeye. He graduated from Hawkeye. He went on to UNCP. Now UNCP, then it was Pembroke State University. He got his degree in chemistry. He became a chemist. And he did that work for a while. That was 69, but by 73, he had tired with chemistry because that wasn't his real calling. Helping people was his calling. So he went into law. And he graduated from North Carolina Central in 73 with his degree in law, and immediately went to Washington, D.C. and began using his degree, where he worked on the general counsel for the financials, for U.S. financial companies, for the U.S. financial division. And while he was doing that, Mr. Pierce, the man he wasn't satisfied, so he went on and got his master's degree in law at Georgetown University. And the degree that he got was focused on tax law, which he never really ended up using it in that capacity because he wanted to help. And where he was at, he still heard the cry of his people. Hundreds of miles away in Washington, D.C., he still heard the cries of his people at home, and he couldn't shake it, so he ended up coming home.
The 50th anniversary of the death of Dr. Martin Luther King, 50th anniversary of the death of Robert F. Kennedy, and the 30th anniversary of the death of Mr. Julian T. Pierce. And all three of these people are transformative leaders. They were agents of social change, social justice, equality, fair and equitable treatment of all people. Julian died, but if we do not go forward to make the environment better for our children, then we have died with him. So I know that without a shadow of a doubt that is why we all come together each year, volunteer our time, our hearts, our sweat, sometimes tears, to make this event successful.
Now, Mr. Pierce, he worked, like I said, he worked in Washington, D.C. But in 78, he came on home. He came back to Pembroke, North Carolina, which is the large concentration of Native Americans in Robeson County is in Pembroke and surrounding areas. And he set up his shop there and started a legal aid corporation. And the task he set out to do was to help poor minorities as well as whites with the legal system, because there was a lot of holes and a lot of trouble. And what we find out is a lot of corruption in our legal system, then as it is now. And he started doing battle and helping people as he could and as he saw fit as well. Simultaneously, him doing that, he was on legal boards for the state, general counsel boards for the state. He was on medical boards to help with funding for medical buildings. And his most important role outside of law was with the school system. Julian was one of the few people that single-handedly and basically unified the school system and desegregated it. Because like I said before, the school he graduated from was a poor native school. And what he did was he brought the education way up for us kids, because during this time was when I was in school. And he made it where it was even for everybody. He desegregated and unified the public schools of Robeson County. And not only did he help Native kids, he helped black kids as well as poor white kids, because he knew how we suffered, because he went to the same school. The school he was in, even though it was in another county, was more unified with us than the schools inside of Robeson County. And he saw this, and he saw the need. And with his help and through the grace of God as well, I went to a desegregated school. I went to a tri-racial school by the name of Purnell Sweat High School. Without Julian, that school probably would have never been built, and that school probably would have never been unified. Eventually we would have been desegregated, but I have a severe doubt that we'd have ever unified public schools of Robeson County the way we did had it not been for Julian. Let's get on.
So what part of your father's work do you think he would consider unfinished at this point in time?
As you know, he was murdered at 42, and he was killed while he was running for Superior Court Judge, and he would have been the first Native American Superior Court Judge of North Carolina. But he was also investigating the drug trafficking in the county at the same time. He believed that local Sheriff Hubert Stone was involved in that drug trafficking. And he also felt that Joe Freeman Britt, the local white district attorney who was running against him, was corrupt. So he was not able to live long enough to address that corruption. And that probably was the most significant matter on his mind when he died in 1988, along with other inequities that he would have liked to address in our community.
Now, in 1987, North Carolina decided to redistrict a lot of courts. And so they designated one for Robeson County, and they put up a seat for Superior Court Judge. And at the time, we had them before, but they wasn't just for Robeson County. This one would have been specifically for Robeson County. But even the ones we had before, no native had ever sat on that board. And if Julian would have won, he would have been the first native Superior Court Judge in North Carolina. And that meant a lot to Julian. And not only that, by him working as a legal aid, he's seen how the system ground up and spit out poor people in this county. And sad to say that some of the same things Julian was fighting in '88, the same things that's going on right now, 2023. But alas to say, Julian was a man that said, I'm not going to take a back seat. I'm not going to lay down. I'm not going to watch people suffer for no reason and be happy with it. Because Julian, he could have been, he could have been more wealthy than he was if he'd have just turned his head. If he'd have just turned his head, if he'd have just said, it's not my fight, it's not my business, he'd have been better off. He'd be alive. He can enjoy his family. But he had no quit, and that's how he got where he was at. The man had 3 degrees. It's hard getting a degree in chemistry by itself and becoming a chemist. It's hard enough getting a law degree. He had 3 degrees. The man was a genius. Not only was he a genius, he was selfless. And we had to give this man the utmost respect. And that's why I'm doing this story.
The greatest hope hung on Indian attorney Julian Pierce, a candidate for Superior Court judge. Pierce's opponent was Robeson County District Attorney Joe Freeman Britt. Britt is serving his 4th term as DA and has faced criticism from minorities for years. They claim he manipulates the court calendar to force guilty pleas and forces defendants to spend weeks, sometimes months, waiting for their cases to be called. Pierce made the court system a major issue in his campaign.
There are a lot of folks I run into while I'm out campaigning that's had experience with our courtrooms and systems in Robeson County, and they're displeased with how overcrowded the docket is, how many times they had to go to court without ever having their case heard. They may be just witnesses.
Those same people that worked on the merger issue were behind Julian, and they saw a new day for Robeson County to have not only an Indian judge, but a fair judge, a judge that across the board was going to go in and the corruption was going to end, and he was a real threat.
Before he officially announced his candidacy in February, Pierce's supporters say he was asked not to run.
Julian was approached and asked to drop out of the race.
And what was his reaction to that?
Definitely not interested.
He was approached. He told me he was approached by a gentleman from Wilmington, and the deal was this, that he not file for the judgeship, give it to Joe, let Joe have it for 2 years, that Joe had something else that he wanted to go on to, and then at the end of the 2 years, he would see that Julian got to serve the balance of the term, that he would make sure Julian would get appointed. I mean, just the whole suggestion of that thing was just repulsive to him.
The Joe Ruth Locklear is referring to is Robeson County District Attorney Joe Freeman Britt, who did not return our phone calls or respond to our request for an interview. Pierce refused the offer. His campaign continued building momentum.
He came by the office, and I asked him, Julian, what you been doing? He says, oh, he says, I've been out beating the bushes. And he says, you know what, Christine? He says, this campaign's getting bigger than me. I think even Julian was frightened at how people were rallying to him, how people were just gathering to him as a measure of hope. Finally, at last, someone is going to help us. We have hope.
Hope that ended early one March, Saturday morning. Pierce's cousin, Charles Locklear, came over to help him put up campaign posters.
And as I reached to turn the knob, it was unlocked. And as I opened the door, I was speaking to him or calling out to him and looked, and that's when I saw his body lying over here.
Julian Pierce had been shot 3 times with a shotgun, once in the chest, once in the side, and a 3rd time at point-blank range behind the ear.
And my immediate thoughts was, you know, somebody's coming here, has been paid to shoot him, and that's what's happened.
Immediately after